stop Tatum. Shot clock at 6. Tatum, step back, puts up another 3. Back of the room, won't go. Holiday, the offensive rebound. Now the Pacers have to foul. Brown has it, final seconds. That's it, it's over. The Celtics are heading back to the NBA Finals. And another crushing finish for these Indiana Pacers.
What is up, Pacers Nation? You are listening to the Pacers Post Up, brought to you by the brothers of basketball, Brad and Ryan. Crushing finish indeed as the Pacers season comes to an end. The hand of the Boston Celtics, a 4-0 sweep in the Eastern Conference Finals. But what an incredible run for this young Pacers team. So much to unpack and plenty to look forward to this offseason. We had meaningful basketball in the month of May. It was Pacers and Racers, and boy, was it a beautiful thing. We're wrapping it all up for you right here on the Pacers Post Up. All right, Pacers fans, we are back for yet another episode of the Pacers Post Up. Ryan and I are now a couple days removed from the end of the season, the end of our playoff run, the 4-0 sweep by the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't want to say reality setting in, but certainly the sting is starting to wear off a little bit, as I hope it is for most Pacers fans out there. And we really just want to sort of dive into both the Boston series and what we saw, how we got to the 4-0 sweep by the Celtics and some of the, missed opportunities, if you will, areas that Boston clearly, showed their experience, talent, etc. And then also just sort of start to put a bow on this playoff run and season. And we're going to do that not only in this episode, but in some of our, episodes to come. We're going to do a series of report cards that we kind of break down, guards, forwards, centers, etc. So we'll have a couple of additional episodes coming just to kind of get in the nitty-gritty, if you will. Each player will spend a little bit of time on that. But Ryan, here we sit. Eastern Conference run for our beloved Pacers, but we get swept in the Eastern Conference Finals. And where are we at today?
Yeah, it's always tough getting swept, but I guess I was as impressed as I could be in a sweep from this team. We talked about coming in how Boston probably has the most talent top to bottom in the league, and I didn't know exactly how we were going to be matching up against them. They really have 4 creators, 4 ball handlers. I know Kristaps is out, but you've got Horford in there who makes shots. There's really nobody you can sag off of. There's no way on defense. Everybody has to play. We talked about how Tyrese was going to have to defend, and we can hit on his injury, I'm sure, at some point. But I was really impressed with the way the players stepped up, the way they handled their talent, the way we were still able to play our pace against their defense was big, but just couldn't close. Part of that's experience. Part of that was coaching at the end. There were a lot of reasons why, and each game kind of had its own unique reason of if you don't know what I'm referring to, Game 1, Game 3, and Game 4, which each really we had a really good look at it, but just couldn't come through in any of them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I posed the question here, kind of looking at the show notes. Did we win this series, or did Boston win this series, or did we lose this series? And I think we're going to dive into that a little bit because, like you said, Game 1, Game 3, Game 4, all were very winnable games. I saw some things floating around the social media ether around in each of those games based on ESPN's win probability. I'm sure maybe they haven't seen this. We had a 90% or better chance to win in the fourth quarter. And let's just start with Game 1 because that was a 97% chance as we sit there with the ball, 10 seconds to go, 3-point lead, and
it even goes before that. It goes off with 30 seconds left. We had the ball, and Tyrese dribbled it off his knee. And if you've been watching the Pacers all year, I can count on my hands maybe once or twice that's happened. If that, nothing comes to memory, especially in a moment that big. That was tough, and then obviously
that was the second time he did it that game.
In the game, you're right. He did do it in the game, and I think they were both in the fourth, maybe not. But it was really tough. That one where I was hinting at was the coaching, and it really felt like that was the one to steal in this series, where you had said coming in, I think we can get one in Boston and then come home, and all you got to do is win your home games after that. And to get them on the ropes and battle back after giving up that 12-point, spotted him 12 to start the game, basically.
12-0.
And then just couldn't get the ball in bounds, didn't foul, didn't advance the ball when we could have, and didn't get a great look at the end either before overtime. And once it went over to overtime, I think all the Pacers fans knew this was going to be really tough. Tyrese gave us a little life with a made three in there, but it was one of the really heartbreaking losses I felt as a Pacer fan this year, especially because, as you said, a 97, 98% chance to win that game. And it felt that way. With 10 seconds left, if you get the ball in bounds, you're going to win that game.
No question about it. You get the ball in, they foul, you go to the line. And now, frankly, it would have been interesting because it was going into Siakam, and there's a story there that we've touched on a little bit on this show. But for all intents and purposes, you get the ball in bounds, you win the game. It was, as you said, heartbreaking is the word. It was one of those games where in your mind starts to go to, and this should never happen, but it does. Oh my God, we're going to steal game one. It's happening. We've made the comeback, and that just made it all the more gut wrenching. Nikki, my fiance, after the game is like, "What is wrong with you? Get it together." I woke up the next morning thinking about that game. And I don't do that typically. I've heard from other fans that had a similar feeling. Game two, we're not going to touch too much on that because game one really showcased what we've said is our inexperience. And obviously game two is where Halliburton goes down with the injury. That changes the dynamic of the series. But there's a lot to talk about in game 3 and 4. And so, whether it's others stepping up, whether it's still our inability to close. I mean, what do you take away? I guess let's start with game 3, another game with, a lead down the stretch that just didn't go our way.
Yeah, I guess if you're going to start, and I'll start on a positive here, I think you start with Nembhard and his ability to step up in this series. We're kind of hoping that this is kind of a Nembhard glowing game in terms of just like, this is more to come. More to show next season, because I think he averaged in the series against the Celtics something like 21-7 on pretty good shooting splits. His number in the playoffs were like 15 points per game, 56% from the field, and 48% from deep.
I saw that.
It was something astronomical for what you would expect from kind of your off-guard ball or off-ball handler. And he showed in the lead he can get to the rim. He can attack. His shot is there. He's not afraid of it anymore. He started off the season a little slow and has really found a rhythm with it. And it was unfortunate that he had the turnover. It was a hell of a play by Drew at the end of that game to get that ball. But he played phenomenal. And another guard, obviously, TJ did too. But Nembhard, what did you see from him?
Well, I'm going to answer that question after I make one point, because we talked about coaching in game 1, not advancing the ball, not fouling. I thought that, and I love Rick. This is not me trying to start a narrative about Carlisle's got to go, but I think in a situation that we saw in game 3, Holiday makes a hell of a play at the end of the game, but all of Boston's defense was back.
Yeah, we did not have an advantage, and we were pushing clearly, trying to get something to go, and that's where Drew made a good play. And I'm with you where nobody's trying to run Rick out of the building, but he deserves some criticism for how he handled the late games.
You have to save the player from themselves sometimes, particularly when you're dealing with a second-year guard.
Well, and he needs to go. Nembhard, he can't be looking around, are you going to call it or are you not? He's just thinking, I'm going, and if Rick calls this, he calls it.
And I guess that's my point, is Rick's got to recognize where we're at. It was not a we have the numbers transition, and Rick has let it play out a number of times this season, and I'm not sure it's really worked a ton, to be honest. I mean, if the most recent critical game winners, I guess the Nembhard 3 was huge, and that was just a broken play. But you talk about similar situational, the Tyrese game winner in the Milwaukee series, that was a set play run from where we advance the ball, you get it in the backcourt, et cetera. I don't remember a lot of instances where us letting it play out really worked in our favor. So I do think that was unfortunate, as you said, because Nembhard clearly elevated his game to a level we really hadn't seen. I'm interested to see how this coaching staff evaluates that and what they can conceive to get more of that while he's alongside Tyrese. Nembhard's never going to be the primary ball handler on this team. He was that in Game 3. Jaylen Brown had a funny quote after the game talking about how guys turned into Michael Jordan on the floor. And I think he was, I think he was referring a lot to Nembhard. His ability to penetrate, get to that mid-range, and then shoot the three confidently. That's where I saw the most, just in terms of if he can shoot with that confidence next year, that gives us another dimension that, frankly, we didn't have this season. So, but we lose Game 3, and then Game 4.
One more point on Game 3 real quick, and this is kind of a side note. Credit to Jenny Busick for the Madden-style final play in that game to get Neesmith, what was a great look with about a second and a half, just short to would have sent it to OT. But I just thought that's an example right there of maybe if we had saved that play for a different time in that series when we were up there, it would have been different.
Was it Jenny? Because I thought Rick said Mike Weiner. But
so he did, and then had to go back and re-credit it.
Oh,
so you're right. That's why I was crediting specifically. He did say Mike the first time.
Good on you. I guess Jenny. I got to dig deeper next time. But no, it was an awesome play. And Neesmith got a great look. Yep. It was a little bit short, just the way it goes. Frankly, we shouldn't have been in that situation, in my opinion. Al Horford, I think he was 7 of 12 that game, and and we'll touch on Boston in a minute. But you go to Game 4, and I just felt like, Ryan, it was almost like watching a replay of Game 3.
It was,
and not to just skirt on by the majority of the game, but midway through the fourth quarter, there was a 5-point swing with a T.J. McConnell missed layup. And Jaylen Brown goes down and hits a three in the corner. It would have been us up 11, and instead we're only up 6. And it was huge.
Yeah.
I just don't know. Not that we didn't have chances, but what was the stat? We didn't score a point in the final 3.5 minutes of the game.
Yeah, give credit there. In each of these losses, Boston's defense clearly went up a level in the late game and really put on the clamps. And that's what you have when you have those 4 and Al Horford. But really, I mean, Derek White's an all-defensive caliber
Unbelievable.
player. Oh, Derek White, and we talked about this. He would come out of absolutely fucking nowhere to block shots or get a steal. He just has, and this is where we give like Ben Shepherd great defensive instincts. His are off the charts.
Yeah.
And not even to mention Drew Holiday, who we've all known, and everyone credits him as basically the best guard defender in the league for the last 5 or 6 years now, and still remains. And then Brown and Tatum obviously are on a similar level, and it makes it difficult when you're trying to get into those slower late possessions, and we couldn't find a shot. We missed a few we probably should have hit. You have it here. Siakam kind of disappeared late in Game 4, and we maybe needed somebody more to go to. And then Turner also having a back issue. I don't know if you heard that going in.
Yeah, I did see that.
And we kept saying the game, where is Turner? Which now makes more sense in hindsight why good for him to go out there and try, but he clearly didn't have it all game outside of a 1-minute stretch to start the third where he hit a couple threes in a row. But it was just tough that last 3 minutes of that game where you could feel it in the building that this is what we've seen for 2 games before, and it's likely going that way. And then, Derek White had been cold all game and then gets a wide open corner 3, and you knew it was going.
Yeah, and it felt like it was going for them all series. Yeah. They had those shots, whether it was Derek White in Game 4, Horford in Game 3.
Tatum won.
Tatum hit the one in
Brown
overtime.
Hit the big one.
Brown hit the big one in Game 1. I mean, so they just made all the timely shots, and credit to them. Yeah. And I would tell you, the way I looked at their defense, and they – there's no chink in the armor. There's no weak link. There's nobody that you look at and say, I mean, I think about, look in the mirror. Defenses were attacking Tyrese Halliburton, right? That they were trying to get switches. And even in this series, and we'll touch on Obi's, report card here in a couple episodes, but I thought they were clearly attacking Obi Toppin. Yeah. I went back and looked at his numbers on Jason Tatum in this series. Not good. No. Tatum was shooting something like 70% on him in this series as the primary defender. And I think besides Neesmith, he was the next in line in terms of, how many possessions he played against Tatum, and they were forcing that.
Yep.
They were forcing those mismatches or switches, I should say, and that's going to be something we've got to talk about long term. You've got Jarris Walker sitting there, et cetera. We can get into that later, but I think Boston just proved. I mean, you look back to the Milwaukee series, it was like, okay, let's get their guys in the pick and roll. Are they going to drop? Are they going to, and that's where Miles was able to have success. We did some similar things against the Knicks, maybe a little different. We were attacking Hart, a smaller defender, with Siakam. And so I just didn't feel like we really ever found that go-to advantage. And so, we needed to win with perfect execution, and we weren't there. So I do want to ask you, you brought up Siakam, and I had it here in the notes. What do you attribute that to? Because I've got a thought, and I'm just curious, his disappearance, if you will, in some of these late end of game situations. What do you attribute to anything? Do you have a thought on that? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No, I'd push it back to you. If you've got a thought, let's hear it.
Well, Siakam has, throughout the end of this season, et cetera, I think it's an endurance thing. I think he looks like he gets gassed. And I know that he's one of the guys that has not missed a lot of time, and he's played the most minutes and all this. I just think it's something that he's coming into. He came into, I should say, in the middle of this year, a system that's pace was way ramped up from what he's been used to. Didn't have an offseason, a training camp, or anything like that. And I just thought there was some fatigue there, where he was being asked to do a lot. He was getting a little gassed, and so it's just something. Listen, I'm not in the camp that he's too old. I mean, he's 30 years old.
Oh,
there's
our pace of play can hurt even us at times because we run and gun so much, especially when Tyrese goes out. Now he's getting all the focal point of the defense, and we're running our offense largely through him and Nembhard now. And so I could see that he has had points, and we even saw this after those first two Bucks games in the early series where then he kind of fades. So maybe you get, and that is where you get into your 30s, a little bit of, one game here, one game there, but it definitely looked like at points in the fourth quarters he was huffing and puffing a bit.
Yeah, I just felt that from him, and it's just something that I think he's going to have to, we'll have to look at in the offseason, see if he can get the conditioning ramped up a little bit. I guess, as we kind of transition, it's a tough series. There's not, we're not going to make, it's not cupcakes and rainbows here. We lost 4-0, and I think it's worth saying that, and Siakam was the one that said this, you can't take these things for granted. It's not like, we made it this year and, we're going to be back next year. I think Kyrie Irving, said it in the post game yesterday, and we're recording this right after the Mavs clinch. It's been 7 years since he's been to the finals. You just nothing's guaranteed. So I think it's unfortunate that we didn't have a better showing. But where do we go from here? What do you, as you evaluate this run ahead of schedule, as we've talked about, now for a couple of weeks, what are you looking forward to this offseason and going into, I guess this next chapter of Pacers basketball, hopefully winning basketball again in Indiana?
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking, I guess, at the offseason, there's a few points, and we've talked about it here. I think everybody knows we're kind of waiting on the Siakam deal to hopefully come through here.
Do you think it's going to be 5 years, 245?
I would be a little surprised if it was 5 years. I don't think Indiana wants to go that far into the future with that big of a number. Now, I wouldn't be surprised, obviously, if that's what Siakam wants out of the deal. I think we're probably looking at the 3 to 4 full max deal would be my guess.
I hope we land 4-year full max. That feels right to me. I don't think he's going to command anything more than that on the open market with where he's at right now. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but yes, Siakam is priority one. Everybody said that. So what's next?
Well, and then if we're talking offseason 2, then there's Obi's contract. I heard Zach Lowe said he was thinking in the ballpark of $15 million a year.
Okay.
I think that might be a little high, although maybe somebody wants to. If he's available, and we've talked about this, and this will be our next one that we'll definitely want to hit on, is this internal growth compartment.
Yeah,
we have all these guys 24 and under who that is where, if we want to get back to the mountaintop, these guys will have to continue to grow and get better and develop their skills. But I still, even if, the rotation is going to be really tough next year, let's say if we do get Obi, because somebody between Shepard, Matherin, Walker is not getting minutes off the gate, which would be really tough. And no matter who it is, I'd be pissed and talk about it. But I think it's worth at least getting the asset back in the building so that if you have him and you want to make a 2-for-1 deal come the trade deadline with a couple of our young pieces, upgrade with another bigger wing or something, that's where I sit. Where do you sit with Obi?
I see it exactly like you do. I almost see it as a Bruce Brown type situation.
That's great.
In the sense of, if you run down our cap, numbers for all these guys, okay? You've got Matherin, Walker, Shepard, Nembhard, all on rookie deals. McConnell, you're not moving off of, so you can throw him out. James Johnson's not under contract. Isaiah Jackson's still on a rookie deal. You start to realize that you don't really have a lot of trade flexibility because the numbers are so low. If you're going to upgrade, let's say you wanted to move a Nembhard. I'm not suggesting that at all, but that has been the discussion now because of what he did in the Eastern Conference Finals particularly. Well, that's not a very movable contract for anything.
To get somebody with talent back, unless you're getting another person on a rookie deal, which is hard to do.
You're going to be hard-pressed to find an upgrade at that position, And so, if you get Obi, let's say it is 12 to 15 million, somewhere in that neighborhood, I would love it to be closer to 12. I understand why Lowe might say 15, but it gives you flexibility to do a 2-for-1, to move on some of these younger guys. I hope we don't feel the need to do that. I'm not saying don't listen if you're Chad Buchanan and Kevin Pritchard, but Buchanan said it in his exit interview. He mentioned the growth from within, and I think that shows a level of patience from our front office to say, why would we be in a rush? We're watching these guys get better, and they are, I wrote it down. Halliburton, Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, Isaiah Jackson, Ben Shepard, Matherin, Walker, all under 24 years old. And all players that are essentially in your rotation. I know there's some, that carries you 11 deep. So that's, if we're going to throw Walker.
That's the conversation we just kind of had.
So that's interesting, and something that we'll definitely on this podcast, not going to dive into it today, but be keeping an eye on as this offseason plays out.
I think we're in the rare spot where even the fans would agree we'd all be happy to see this run back. Now, do we have Eastern Conference Finals expectations? Sure, it'd be great to get back there. I think there's definitely a chance, but it wouldn't be a bad season next year if we didn't reach the same spot, if we ran it all back, because of what you just said. All these guys can grow. Halliburton is not at his ceiling. We just saw Nembhard, and Bill Simmons had a great tweet that I love where he said Nembhard was giving him 2022 Brunson vibes, which just shows his potential to grow. And so I think there's an opportunity. We haven't even seen Walker other than flashes at this point. And he could really solve some of that, where that wing defender, we needed somebody on a Tatum, on a Brown, which we hope we can grow into. He's still raw. That's what we hear from the coaching. He's going to be 20
years old.
So I would be happy. Matherin, we haven't even talked about in a couple months now. And his time, he was averaging 15 points a game. He's still our best rim attacker on the team. And so
getting to the foul line, we were grossly outshot from the free throw line.
It felt like every fucking game.
It was
by large margins.
It was. There was a stat floating around that Siakam was the first guy to have 50 points in the first two games of a series and zero free throws. It's we've got to figure out a way to solve that puzzle. Just if nothing else to at least keep them honest, right? There's something to be said for, I know people get frustrated with Matherin's put his head down mentality, but his rookie year in particular, it was all about getting to the rim and forcing the whistle. So we'll have to see where that goes. You did mention, injecting Walker from a defensive standpoint, and I kind of want to ask this before we put a bow on our season, because so much of this year was the tale of two stories, really. It was our pace, our offense, speed, historic numbers to start the season. Carlisle has talked about that, inflection point in the middle of the year where we made a decision to say, we're going to play defense. We're going to change our lineup. We're going to move Buddy Hield. We're going to, a lot of things. Did we prove anything on the defensive end in your mind over the last, let's call it 2 months to close the regular season and playoffs that says we can be middle of the road next year?
I definitely, the way our lineup has now been built with Nembhard, Nesmith, as you said, Siakam puts everybody in place in that rotation because it felt like early in the year everybody was playing out of position defensively.
Yeah.
We had games where like Buddy Hield was guarding Giannis, which is just never going to work no matter how you try to scheme it up.
Right.
But I think in the playoffs you saw now, again, we've talked about the injury luck. We have still an issue, I think, at times shutting down the star players.
Yeah.
There still seemed, Brown had 40-point game, Brunson had a few, Dame went off. But I think definitely our talent and the young guys have figured out a role. Nesmith had a great defensive series throughout the playoffs.
He was
often
phenomenal.
Guarding Brunson, and he held Tatum a couple in check a few games.
Tatum shot something like 30%, 33% on Nesmith throughout the series.
And so I do think that there is potential for us to be in that 15 to 18 range next year defensively. Yeah. And as long as the offense doesn't take a step back, which I don't see why it would, that's going to be hopefully, this year we were a 6 seed. Does that push you into the 4 or 5 matchup, into the 3rd seed? Now, again, you'll have to watch the East because there's a lot of young teams around us, like the Magic, like the Knicks who are going to be able to grow, and like the Cavs, depending on the Mitchell situation and how that all plays out. But I do think we saw steps defensively, and Tyrese hinted at this too because he's going to be obviously our long-term guard, and teams are going to attack him. He said he's going to try to work on his body. He needs to put on a little bit more weight still to not only to last throughout the whole season, but be a little bit more physical on that side. And we saw times where, when he can switch back on defensively, he's a pretty good hedger on the screens.
Yeah, he is.
He's just not still great at when he does have to switch, when you play specifically a team like Boston where you need to switch more just because of how diverse they are on the offense, they can get picked on a little bit.
Yeah, I think that this postseason run will do wonders for us in terms of not only understanding what's required on the defensive end, but also the experience of, I can push myself to this level. And we saw flashes of it. I get it. We just lost 4-0 to the Boston Celtics. A lot of that was stupid shit, executional shit that we just are going to figure out as we get into those, heavy pressure situations, if you will. But I was largely impressed with our defense. You hit on a big piece. Halliburton is our weakest link. And I think if he can improve his body a little bit, be able to add some muscle, play a little bit more physical. He does not have great feet. Neither does Siakam. That's a challenge. But as I look at McConnell, Shepard, Mathurin, Walker, Isaiah Jackson, even Obi improved a ton. We're going to be able to throw out defensive lineups, I think, next year to certainly be a middle-of-the-road defense in the regular season. Whether or not we can translate it into elevated playoff play like we did this year.
And that's where I think, actually, if we can hold our head, I think Walker could be a big piece on that, to be able to play different styles and different lineups where Walker can guard all these different guys. Because if you could roll out a lineup with a Nesmith, Nembhard, Walker, and Tyrese, those three could be pretty interchangeable, very switchable. And if Walker could even guard, kind of a 2 through 4 situation, it would be huge for us to have a wing with size that can do that.
Ryan, I look at Walker and I say, why, and shenanigans and bullshit aside, why can he not be a Draymond type player? Because he can handle the ball. He can play physical. The guy weighs 240 pounds. I mean, he's got tree trunks on his lower body.
And the crazy thing is, that is why he was drafted out of Houston, was his defense. Now, the bright side that we've seen from his limited flashes is his shooting seems to be better than we thought.
Buchanan touched on that.
His playmaking seems to be pretty there. I mean, he had a pretty wild one in the playoffs in garbage time, I say, where he threw behind the back that was going nowhere. But he's got that, and the word we'll use over and over, that connector piece. Maybe not your initial playmaker, but who knows how to make that second read. But if he can get that defensive opponent, that will be how he gets minutes.
For sure. We saw that with Shepherd this year. It's why Ben was on the floor, and he had a couple of tough games in the Eastern Conference Finals shooting the ball. But through the first two series, he was 50% from the corners, 41 from three in general.
If you're not encouraged by his playoff run, then what the fuck are you watching?
I can't wait to get to our report card episodes to talk about some of these guys, because he did not play like a rookie in any way, shape, or form. It's the 26 overall pick. You have to give. If you look at our drafts the last 2 years between Matherin, Walker, Nembhard, and Shepherd, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, those are all guys that are going to factor, unless you deal somebody, and that would be hopefully to get an upgrade or an asset. Those are all guys that are going to factor in long term.
And those guys who we've mentioned, the ones who actually played in this playoffs, were not lottery picks between Nembhard and Shepherd.
No.
I mean, they were 26 and 32, I believe.
It's impressive. After all the draft whiffs and the TJ Leafs and the Goga Batadzes of the world,
Tyler Hansbrough.
you can just we had a chance. It's so funny that you say Hansbrough. We could have had Drew Holiday.
Yep.
I'll never forget that draft, and whatever. Just think about that, Pacers fans. Tyler Hansbrough is on a pickleball court somewhere, and Drew Holiday's ruining our finals dreams still. So we'll kind of. This is a perfect kind of segue, if you will, because we're going to hit on we're going to have some time to get into all these individual players, talk about report cards on the season, what we're looking forward to. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that. We're going to spend just a couple of brief seconds, Ryan. We found out last night that the Mavs are going to, they finished the series 4-1 against the Wolves. We're going to get Boston against Dallas here on, I don't think it starts till June 6th. So we got to wait a little bit. Just early thoughts. How do you think this series plays out? Does Boston finally get over the hump, or does Luka spoil the show?
I think it's pretty clear Luka's the best player in the series, but that doesn't mean this is how Boston's been doing it, not to even throw any shade on Tatum or Brown at this point. I'll be curious now, who do you want to win?
Oh, I want Dallas to win.
Okay, so I want Dallas to win too, but I've been talking to a lot of Indiana fans who want Boston, and this is a great point for Brad Stevens. To get his kind of his executive coaching, whatever. He's built a lot of this team
for sure,
and coached a lot of these players.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
And so that's I as well. That's why I heard that, because my initial gut when people asked me was the exact same. I was like, oh, fuck Boston. I don't want. And I don't hate Boston as much as I would say like I hate the Knicks or even Milwaukee for that matter. But I just want the West to win. I go back and forth on Luka a bit, whether I like him or not. I like his game at times. I don't like how much he bitches 24/7.
Yeah.
But
it's the era we're in.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Listen, Tyrese is guilty of it. I
think Luka might be number one in the league.
He probably is. I'm not going to argue you on that. But I just think it's the era we're in. It's the constant bitching and talking to the refs.
But he talks shit, which I like too. You saw him yelling at the Wolves fans, go the fuck home or something like that. And so I think it's going to be a really fun series. It's different styles. Again, the Mavs are going to play through Luka, or Boston's going to let it flow and just find the hot hand like they did against us. So I think it'll go 6 or 7 for sure. If I had to, gun to the head, I'd probably lean, if I'd put money on it, Boston was going to win, especially if Kristaps can come back, which them being able to rest him this whole series was a huge win for them. So we'll see. Who do you think wins?
Yeah, I'm going to lean towards Boston. I agree with your take. I think Luka's the best player left in this playoff, in the playoffs. If he's not in your top 5 in the league, I don't know who.
I think it's hard to argue at this point. He is battling Joker for the 1 and 2 best player. Giannis has been too injured now the last couple years where he was in that conversation, but I think they've elevated themselves.
I do think Boston gets it done because collectively they are the more talented team, and I don't think that's even a question at this point. They have both Derek White and Drew Holiday are going to be able to be effective to some degree on Kyrie. And I do think we saw it, frankly. I was almost begging for the Pacers to get to the finals against Dallas because we played them really well, and they have and I think what I'm trying to get at is Nesmith gave Luka problems because of the physical nature, and I think they can throw some Tatum, Brown at him.
Even Drew will get some time on him, I bet.
I think he will have some highs and lows because of that, defense that Boston's going to throw at him this series. But it'll be interesting because I feel like Jason Tatum settles way too much.
Well, that's what we wanted in this series. Every time Tatum took a step back or a pull-up, as long as it wasn't totally wide open, you were happy with it. It's like, because I think at one point he had a dunk in Game 4, and it was like, I haven't seen him do that all series. And it's always there, especially when you got a guy like Obi on you. You can get by him.
For sure. I think what could cause Boston some trouble if they get into close game scenarios is just who's going to step up in those moments. We fumbled the bag more than they won the games, I felt like, and I don't think Dallas will do that. So I think it's going to be a fun series. The NBA's got to be loving it. You get two major markets. You've got young stars across the board, storylines with Kyrie, then the Celtics, Porzingis, all of that stuff. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I've kind of already previewed. We're going to get into the report card episodes coming up. We're going to have a ticket giveaway. Yep. So I just went to my first Fever game last night. Mm-hmm. They have the worst defense I've ever seen, ever. They're now 1-8, and I mean, there was no help side. There was no help the helper. Layup fest last night for the Seattle Storm.
They've got a new coach this year, right, too? I don't know.
Is it the Storm or you talking about the Fever?
The Fever.
Christy Sides, yeah. I think Lynn, what was her name? Lynn Dunn, does that sound right?
Yeah.
Went into the front office. And so now, I don't know if this is Christy Sides' first season or what. She's coming under a little bit of heat already because of the start. It's a young team. It was a rough watch last night.
It's tough when the expectations were probably too high for a team because you're getting again, not to double down on the reverse what I just said, what could be the greatest female basketball player of all time coming into your team. So expectations were going to be through the roof to win immediately.
And that's never the way it works.
Yeah.
I mean, I go back to, you think about Peyton Manning's first year as a Colt. I mean, he led the league. I think he set the NFL record for interceptions. We won 3 games that year. It was terrible.
I think LeBron won like 25 in his first season.
It's just the way Wembanyama this year.
Oh, yeah.
So the challenge is Caitlin Clark has brought all these fans, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But they're fans that weren't going to pay attention before now. So if that's the case, you have to assume that maybe their understanding of how this works or historical context or, rookies don't usually come in and win titles type of deal. So needless to say,
the future is bright.
It's bright, and the Fever games were a lot of fun. I mean, Was
it a full house?
It was damn near a full house. Okay. It felt full. It was, Kurt Streblow on the sideline, Troy Pepper on the call, a lot of the same folks from Pacers games. Nice. It was fun. I had never been, and of course I'm coming in as a bandwagoner, obviously, but we're going to do a giveaway. They play the Atlanta Dream on June 13th, so check out social media for that. Just previewing a couple other stuff. We're going to get into, just to kind of, the season's over. But that does not mean we're going to end these episodes. We're going to get into the report cards. We're going to be paying attention to draft here in June. Free agency opens at the end of June. We're going to have Olympics talk with Tyrese being on Team USA, and all signs point to him being healthy for that. We're going to have Drew Nemhard and Benedict Mathurin on Team Canada. They actually kind of kick off the Olympic basketball season in early July with an exhibition in Vegas, USA. Versus Canada.
It's going to be a lot of fun to watch Nemhard on that team.
Yeah, I think he's going to... Jamal Murray should start for them.
Jamal and Shea will likely be their backcourt, but Nemhard will get minutes specifically because of his defense. I bet that they will run him a lot.
It should be fun. So we've got guys that are going to be playing some meaningful basketball this summer. We're going to pay attention to all of that, and certainly... as things come in and news drops and all that, we'll be on it over the summer months. What a season.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Fucking awesome.
It was a lot of fun. I hope everybody got out and got to enjoy Pacers and Racers. 500 was delayed, but it turned out to be an awesome race. And I hope we have a lot more of that late May and maybe even early June at some point, basketball to talk about with you guys, Pacers fans. But we'll have plenty coming at you here in the next couple of weeks, and appreciate you guys listening.